welcome back to the channel. Today I'm speaking with Professor David Blockley again, and today he's going to tell us about Pillar 1 in his new book. So welcome, Professor Blockley. Do you want to introduce yourself to everyone again?
Hi, Sabrina, and thanks again for the second time on your channel. I'm honoured that you've invited me back. The book is entitled Climate Change is an Opportunity, and with the subtitle, Why We Need Principled Capitalism. Now, some people might think that principles and capitalism are mutually exclusive, but in fact, that's the message. Now, why did I write this book? Because I see that we have a severe existential threat to life as we know it. It is a threat that's so severe that I believe that we should change the way we work, we operate, both personally, collectively, in our relationship with each other and the natural world. And in fact, part of the book is about the economics of doing that. And it's in three parts. The first part is about thinking about ourselves, other people, and the natural world. Mm-hmm. The second part is about testing information, what we're told. And the third is about acting on moral imperatives. So some people have proposed a form of principled capitalism, which they call moral capitalism. Now, I think the first thing is to contrast the present liberal capitalism that we're living under with these ideas of principled capitalism. And the first point is that liberal capitalism is based on individual private property in the means of production. It tends to advocate minimal government, low taxes, privatization, free trade, and deregulation. And it relies very strongly on the markets. Now, what I'm suggesting is that we have a new form of capitalism that's based on our obligations to each other and to the natural world through shared moral values that become social norms. It can emerge from our current liberal capitalism if we widen the idea of personal satisfaction, what economists call utility, to include all forms of moral obligations to each other and to nature. So it's based on a wider sense of duty, of care to others, as we become citizens of the world, defined by our interdependence and the sense of community. So, as you said, I propose 10 pillars to this form of capitalism.
Yeah, and in our last video, you did go through the 10 pillars, but today we thought we'd just dig a bit deeper into one of them, or the first one, and that is the golden rule, isn't it, David?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Obey the golden rule.
Well, this goes back right to the time of Confucius. Mm-hmm. It's part of all religions in the world. And to me, it's common sense. It's the way we behave towards each other. And put simply, it's do not do to others that you would have them not do to you. So, in other words, treat others as you would want to be treated by them. That clearly requires some sense of sacrifice or compromise, because it sounds idealistic, doesn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say, think a lot of us have heard of the do unto others as we'd have others do unto ourselves, but it's hard. It's easier said than done, don't you think? As you said, it is idealistic, but in the book you expand on some of the ways that people can practically get back to those basic ways of being.
Well, I think the first thing to realize is it's not a universally applicable rule.
Mm-hmm.
It's not absolutely prescriptive.
Yeah.
It's easy to find examples where it wouldn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Rather, it's based on a habit, on the way we think about ourselves, how we've been educated, how we've cultivated ourselves and our trust in other people, humankind. So it's asking us to renew our faith in humankind. Remember, I'm talking about when we are facing extinction through climate change, which some people will think is too severe, but I believe is what we're facing. So there are obviously boundaries to this, but it's morality and humanity coming together, I think. But the counter examples are easy to find. Mm-hmm. Imagine you're a parent and you've got 2 children and they're clearly in danger. But you can only save one of them. They're drowning, say, and you're going to save one. And one of them is your child. So the question is, do you save your child rather than someone else's child? And the natural human instinct is to, of course, save your own child. That's an ethical dilemma, which we can only solve in the context of the problem that we are dealing with, or the situation we're dealing with, i.e. 2 children drowning. Another example is, why would you send somebody to prison? Mm-hmm. We don't want to go to prison. I don't want someone to send me to prison. It's the context that overrides, because by law, sending someone to prison is protecting the great good. So what we're saying is that it's the golden rule is something that we should aspire to, and it should become a habit. But it isn't always applicable in every context.
And that's true, because as you mentioned, these are 2 extreme ends that hopefully none of us on this call will have to face. But we know in day-to-day life, whether you're a judge or a barrister, you're making decisions on whether somebody's done something wrong and the consequence of those actions. I guess in our normal day-to-day lives, it might be simpler things such as, and because we're talking about climate change, it's whether or not you decide to drive your car each day, knowing the impact it might have on the environment, or use a different mode of transport might be one of those things about do unto others that we could think about.
Yeah. And I know you're aiming this channel at nurses, and you must get dilemmas every day of this kind.
Yeah, and I think I was just thinking about an example of something that a nurse might deal with, and a simple one would be about information around medication, because we do know medications that we give people do have adverse side effects, but on the other hand, for some people it could be life-changing as well. So it's again giving enough information to the person that's in front of you so that they make an informed choice, whichever way, and supporting them through that. That might be, again, the more extreme end, but one of our code of conduct is not to cause any harm and to think about our actions and omissions, so whether we did an action that caused harm or whether we didn't do an action and there was harm as well.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of getting into the shoes of other people, isn't it? Trying to feel what it's like to be them, the person that you're interacting with. So that's very difficult.
Yeah.
But there are lots and lots of examples throughout the history of phrases that captured the idea. I mean, in Christianity, love thy neighbor as thyself is a common maxim, isn't it? It's about seeing the good in other people, playing by the rules, or live and let live, being selfless and tolerant of other people, being fair, having the freedom to help other people. And the other one that occurred to me was one who profits most, who serves best. In other words, by obeying the golden rule, you get benefit yourself.
Yeah. And as you were saying those things, David, I think one of the key things I remember every nurse would talk about is being empathetic towards the patients that we care for. So that bit around how we walk in somebody's shoes. And we do know that, so I work in mental health. I haven't experienced mental illness myself. So it might be difficult to walk in their shoes, but walking alongside, thinking about how you support them in their journey to recovery. And the other bit that you talked about around the one who profits most also serves best. We talk a lot about leadership, and I was in a session with students the other day, and one of the leadership styles that came up was servant leadership. Although again, some people might feel a reaction to the word being a servant and a leader, but there's something around, how you put others first, but also in healthcare, we realize the power imbalance and how you make sure you try and balance that in the interactions that we do have with our patient service users, clients.
Yeah, I've come across that term, servant leadership, and I think it's a good example of where we have to think about ourselves differently. And a lot of people think of leaders as in a kind of military hierarchical sense, telling you what to do. Now, in certain situations like the military, that is exactly what's required, because you can't mess about when you're on the front line fighting other people. Somebody's got to make the decisions, and people have to, knowing that they've got a common purpose, they have to agree with that. But in most other situations, leaders, I think, have to show by example, and by being, showing that they care in what you're doing together. So I think the idea of servant leadership may surprise some people, perhaps just as the phrase principal capitalism may surprise people, because capitalism tends to be associated with our current form of profit, which often leads to greed. And there are many, many examples of where people have taken advantage of other people and scams, all sorts of criminal activity, even at the top level in business and finance. Many, many examples. Too many, but putting morals and capitalism together you've got to think differently. And the reason, as we've said, they've got to think differently because we have this existential threat that if we don't change, it's all going to fall apart.
Definitely. And that goes into some of the, I guess, the other bits that takeaways we can do practically around when we think about do unto others. And I think the key thing here is think, and I know in the last video you talked about how thinking should be a class that everybody should have.
Yes.
And as I was saying, thinking, I was just reflecting because I know one of the key takeaways you talk about in that bit where we talked, there's the extreme end of do unto others, but there's things that we can do. And one of that is just reflecting on our own actions and learning from our day-to-day experiences. Any others that and that's something as nurses or healthcare professionals we're encouraged to do. We're encouraged to reflect on action, reflect in action, and then reflect after. Because, there's always space for learning. It's a learning day every day, I think.
Yes, I think that if there are 3 takeaways from this conversation, I'd say that was the first one. And the second one is being truthful, both to yourself and towards others. Now, sometimes that's, again, very difficult when being truthful is hurtful, or it would be difficult for the other person to take it, and sometimes we justify not being truthful in that situation by telling a white lie. But in my experience, telling white lies always ends up in trouble.
Yeah.
So it's best to be truthful, but it does mean to say that you have to get into the shoes of the other person when you are talking to them, but understanding how they will react, perhaps, to what you're telling them. And that, again, must be writ large in nursing, because you're dealing with patients who may be dying.
Yeah.
Or
sorry, go ahead.
No, carry on.
Yeah. Or just, you have to give news that people don't want to hear. And I was thinking, as you said that about being honest, there's another thing we talk about in nursing is about being compassionate. And some people think, again, compassion is being soft and, again, only saying to people the things they want to hear, but it's recognizing when there are things that go wrong or things that might go wrong and being upfront about it. Because, again, going back to the first point, that's how we learn. But also by doing that, you're being kind and doing unto others as you'd want them to do unto you.
Yeah, that's very true. And so I think good leaders and good communicators don't hide their feelings. They share how they are thinking and feeling, because everybody knows that everybody else is human. So, if there is someone who is trying to tell you something, then he's just a person, just like you are. The Prime Minister is just a man, like the rest of men, and he's a person like other people. So that's the second takeaway, I think. The third one, I think, is being tolerant, is understanding other people's point of view, and when you disagree, not to react emotionally and get all angry, but to see that the world is full of people, all with different views, all slightly different, But in a democracy, we have to find ways of coming together to share our common purpose. We do it rather crudely, but effectively through voting. So, you know, when a decision is made by a politician you don't agree with, you just have to accept that that's what the majority want and accept it. So I think that one of the strengths of the Church of England has been that it's been tolerant in the past. So one of the problems with modern versions of religions, the extreme Christian right, for example, is to become intolerant of others. And we, you know, the religious people that tell us they're right and we're wrong only antagonize, and that creates conflict, and unfortunately all too often leads to extreme terrorism or wars, even just on the basis of what we believe. And I think we have to have the capacity to be tolerant towards others.
You're right, because I think there is strength in being tolerant and appreciating differences, because it only can improve, or as you say, we become better for the differences that we each have, because we can all see things from a different angle, which then improves patients' lives, or you know, even our own. So I do agree that's a really good takeaway.
That's how we learn, isn't it?
Yeah.
By listening. There's a lot of people in this world who don't listen very well. They talk at people rather than with people. So listening and learning, I think, is extremely important. And whilst I'm promoting this as a pillar of principled capitalism, is generally applicable across the board, isn't it? In any case, it's not. I'm just arguing in the book that the climate change imperative is so strong. We really have no choice but to change, in my view.
Great. So thank you, David, and thank you for going through Pillar 1 for us. I hope people learnt those 3 takeaways around reflecting and learning. Sorry, I'll re-record that. Sorry.
Being truthful.
And being tolerant. Right. So I hope people take away those 3 learnings that we had. So being reflective and learning, being truthful, and being tolerant. And if you want to learn a bit more about all the 10 pillars, you can watch the video that we did before. But David and I will be meeting to go through the other pillars in future videos. So thank you for listening. Be bold and brave. And do let us know if you went off and tried any of these things.
Thanks, Dorina.
Thank you, Professor Blockley and David.